13-circuit labyrinth was used more by the Templars, who built Chartres. And the Templars were worshiping Magdalene at that point. The Mag tradition was using hex symmetry on some occasions because it created a storing rather than a delivering of biological magnetism, which in some cases for hive mind functions is more useful. So personally, I consider the 7-circuit labyrinth as having more astral hygiene than the 13. If we look at the zodiac star maps we're going to talk about later in the day, we see that during early history, the zodiac star maps were a mirror image of the stars, but then at a certain stage in history, all the zodiac star maps were a direct projection of the stars. So we go from a stage where we're created by the projection of stars to a stage where we then begin to create stars from here. And so you go from up to down, from receive to send. So ultimately, those symmetry operations become what's called the tree of life. So we have this little animation here. You climb the ladder of symmetry from the tetrahedron to the cube to the dodecahedron. You're climbing this tree of life, the ladder of symmetry. And the ability to do that on the land is the process of making the land a magnetic cauldron for this Jacob's ladder. When you're on Jacob's ladder, it would be boring if you could see the top or the bottom, right? And notice that it's helical. So what that in effect does is it feeds spin symmetry to the surface of a grid. So this is grid engineering 101, that the more axes of symmetry that can be superposed at one time, the more the soap bubble resists popping, which is the immune system of the Earth's grid. So the frequency harmonics of multiple axes of symmetry create a grid as a soap bubble that does not pop. And that's called Gaia's evolutionary octave. And this is from Anti-Gravity in the World Grid by Becker and Huygens, rather famous. And even at that time, ancient times, the dodecahedron was seen as the key to the lock of the grid, yeah? So this ability to embed is how you got into the grid. The combination of the ecosa and the dodeca made this geometry possible. So the dodecahedron becomes the foundation stone of Steiner and the symmetry of DNA, Earth grid, and zodiac. This is the early star mother model. And this is the 15 great circles in 3 dimensions of the Ouroboros, the Ophanim Angels grid. 3 circles per cube, 5 cubes per dodeca, equals 15 great circles in perfect symmetry. So here's how you begin. You find the magnetic cross in the land, and you enact it in stone. And later that becomes the labyrinth. The labyrinth is sometimes implicit and not explicit in Native American stone circles. So what is your stone structure doing? Here's an example of a stone structure. It's called ex cathedra, or cathedral for short. Ex cathedra means from the chair, which is from the place of leverage. So the chairman is the one, the cathedra. The chairman is the one who has access to the magnetism of the earth. It comes from the word catheter, which means access to blood, the catheter, which comes from the word cathar, which is very cathartic, right? Okay? Which is the place where the magnetic blood of the land is unpacked. And what you're suggested to notice here, as you're looking at the cathedra of Machu Mandir, of the Mother in Aurobindo in India, what does it look like? Here's a hint. Look at that picture. Now look at this picture. This is a virus. You see how the virus gets access to the blood? It does it with a screwing motion. The virus is mostly DNA. The DNA comes down here and screws itself through the cell membrane. So cell membrane gets screwed. And the result is penetration. That's what a cathedral does. It screws its way into the grid. Now, the grid doesn't mind giving up a little bit of its blood if it's going to create a structure that can serve Gaia, the collective mind, yeah? So the first thing that has to happen to make a cathedral is to make the earth bleed, which is what happens when you raise a sword from a stone. the S word from the S tone, you get the line from the circle. That's what the Jed, the raising of the Jed, is called. And the one who can do it is called the Jedi. Right? And this, in Sumerian, was called the Shem, the raising of the highward firestone, the Shem stone. And the person who did it was from An Anunnaki, which is Monday's story. So the Shem An, shaman, was one who could raise this highward firestone and get the magnetic blood to converge. Has anybody here ever seen a dragon come out of the earth and fly? There's a famous book in geomantic circles, or a good book, I don't know how famous it is, by David Yarrow. It's called The Dragon in the Ice Castle. And it's about magnetic lines in geomancy and feng shui. Now, in The Dragon in the Ice Castle, David describes very vividly one day having this experience of seeing a magnetic current clairvoyantly, very clearly, come out of the earth and begin to fly. The dragon took wing. At first we thought these Chinese people telling these dragon fairy tales were telling fairy tales. Not true. It's physics. If you take a fast enough shuttered video camera and you look at a bleeding power company transformer, you see these magnetic worms coming off of it that look like parasites. And at first they seem to be able to steer, but then you realize they're a little bit dizzy. So the transformer, by being unable to embed, is creating astral pollution. And the astral pollution comes in the form of these magnetic worms, whose ultraviolet cocoon comes off the transformer, and you can see them with a digital video camera, or if you're clairvoyant. Yeah? Well, that's what happens to these magnetic fields coming out of the earth. Some of them are a little bit parasitic, because they don't know how to make their own fire. Others of them are the true high-winged Draco dragons. Well, this ability to evoke the dragon current was called the thumper in Dune. Anybody ever remember? The magnetic worms in Dune? Shailud. It was the name we later called Shailud the devil. But Shailud was the name of the children of Uru, which was the bastard son of Enlil, later called Metatron, I think. So this ability to evoke a branching algorithm in the magnetic worm of the shapeshifter of DNA was related to this ability to raise the Jed, the sword from the stone, to evoke a magnetic field that went in a line when it used to go in a circle. Magnetism in a circle is called matter. Magnetism in a line is called energy. The translation of vorticity that makes the difference is a spin path. So this led to what's called the harmonic module plan. Supposing you have 4 billion human beings whose DNA is intensely aware that it's going to be fatal if you cannot get through the speed of light. And so every time your DNA thinks it's close to be able to squirt an ultraviolet shape-shifting magnetic worm through the speed of light, your DNA gives it a shot. Now, most women, when this happens, say, I got a headache and I need a pill. Okay? But the fact is, it's your DNA saying, I'm trying to squirt now, otherwise you're going to die. So when you respond negatively to the electricity of your bliss, you're in fact informing your DNA that you choose death over life. So creating a legitimate spin path for bliss to accelerate biological magnetism into stars is the purpose of DNA and government. And so we devised this plan called the harmonic module almost 20 years ago now, which was a description of the biophysics of group bliss process. And today we're much closer now that we have the software for Heart Tuner to share and phase lock heart harmonics over the internet. But you see the concept. This was a description of a stadium with thousands of people, and you have a laser show here, spinning dodecaecosa, and the phase lock of a large number of human hearts. And the laser projectors with mirrors create this optical cocoon here, which acts as a container in the ultraviolet for collective human bliss. Has anybody ever talked to a person who operates lasers at laser shows.